Randy Toms, the former two-time mayor of Warner Robins, Georgia, says you're at one of three places in your life. You're in a fire, about to go in a fire, or you just came out of a fire. As a firefighter who has spent his life fighting literal fires, he knows a little about fires, including how to fight them, survive in them, and learn from them, and how to pick up the pieces and move forward after them. As a man who has faced a few figurative and spiritual fires in his 6.5 decades on this planet, he knows a little about those fires too, and the same principles apply. Through Randy's sometimes difficult life fire experiences, he has developed a double portion of wisdom and has a God-given gift to share that wisdom with others. Besides serving 8 years as the mayor of one of the fastest growing cities in Georgia, Randy is a retired lieutenant with the Warner Robins Fire Department, an ordained minister, a former longtime chaplain of the Georgia Firefighters Association, a published author, and a gifted communicator. Randy currently serves as Executive Director at the Georgia Firefighters Standards and Training Council of Georgia, which keeps him busy as he travels throughout the state, leading that team. So whether you're in a fire, about to go in one, or just came out of one, Randy's message about how to live out of the fire will get your undivided attention.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.
This is Bruce Goddard, and you're listening to the View from a Hearse podcast. As I have mentioned, I've got my friend, really a longtime friend now, Randy Toms. Randy, I always called you Rabbi because when we first met, you were my Sunday school teacher. I think I'd met you before, but I didn't really know you like that. But let's just talk about that. I appreciate you joining me first. Thank you for doing this.
Well, absolutely, Bruce. I'll have to tell you, and I feel like most everybody probably says this, but I'm a little bit nervous being around the likes of you. You are certainly a well-known celebrity. And actually, the way I first met you started that whole thought pattern. And that is, I remember, and I don't know exactly what year it was you made, but the first time I ever laid eyes on you was at a fire conference in Columbus, Georgia, and you were the keynote speaker there. And your speech just impressed me so much, and I'll have to say I was quite enamored with you. And then one day to look up and see you sitting in the middle of my Sunday school class as a student, I think I even told you that day, I can't teach in front of you because I've heard you speak before. And that's where you said, come on, Rabbi, you got this. And that's where the relationship started right there, I guess you could say.
I've called you Rabbi ever since. So, folks, what he's saying is crazy. If you were around Middle Georgia, he was on television every year. He was on this Channel 13 with the, what was it? Jerry Lewis telethon thing,
yeah,
right?
MDA Muscular Dystrophy Telethon.
Yeah, so he's known by everybody in the world, and as you've already heard, he's been mayor of Warner Robins, which is a pretty booming place, Warner Robins, Georgia, for 8 years, and he had served 2 terms. He's done all kind of stuff, but I'll never forget, Randy. I might as well just say this. And the first day I went in your Sunday school class, my wife and I had just moved to Warner Robins, and that was in 2003. And we went to this huge church, which we came from Taylor County and small churches, but this was a big church. And your Sunday school class was the happening place. It was the biggest class there because you were teaching it, and you've got this knack for teaching, but also bringing in humor and just transparency, and he's a great Sunday school teacher, I promise you that. But I walked in, and we were packed. You couldn't get another chair in that room, and I'm sitting by people I'd never met or nor seen in my life, and I looked down, and I realized I had, for lack of a better word, dog crap on the bottom of my shoe. And I
Yes,
was
she did.
first I started smelling it, and I thought, my goodness, something's bad in here. And then Kathy was smelling it. And then I looked at my shoe. I said, Kathy, it's on my shoe. She said, put your foot down and just don't say a word. Don't pick up your foot. She whispered that to me. And I'm sitting there with this guy next to me. I didn't want him to think my breath smelled like that. So I told him, or it may have been a lady, I don't know. It was somebody. I said, I apologize. I stepped in dog doo-doo right before I left out of here, and it's on my shoe. That lady looked at me like my wife almost went under the chair when I did that. Anyway, that's how we got started, right?
That's some start, wasn't it?
Yeah. So, folks, Randy, I've got him on here for a reason. He's got a heck of a story. He's doing a lot of stuff. But before we get into that, I want you to talk about your bride, Jane. That was always been, in my opinion, your best asset. And you got 2 great kids, now grandkids. You got to start by talking about Jane. As I say, and you said to me many times, you and I both punted way past our coverage in the life department. So just to start there, if you will.
Yeah. The first time I ever saw Jane, she was in the 8th grade and had just transferred over from Northside Junior High to Tabor Junior High. She caught my eye, and I tell everybody now, I was in the 9th grade for the first time. And my story now is that I failed the 9th grade so I could try to have 1 extra year to win her favor. But I saw her, and I remember thinking, Bruce, even then, that this is the girl right here. This is, I wasn't a very good kid, and she was a very good girl. And I didn't know how I was going to go about getting it done, but I set in my mind the first time I ever saw her that this is the girl right here. And this is who I'm going to marry. I don't know how I'm going to get it done. And she's going to be my girlfriend. And she was just as sure that wasn't going to happen. And so I pestered her throughout junior high, on throughout high school, and just kept asking her to be my girlfriend and go out with me. And I think we did go out one time in high school, and that wasn't all that good. She always told me that she would go out with me. She kind of liked me, but she would go out with me if I'd go to church with her. And I more or less said I liked her, but I didn't like her that much because my parents had stopped making me go to church by that time. And I wasn't much into church, and she certainly was. And so we never really did connect. I will tell you, and I hope it's okay if I tell this story on your show, but I knew there was a chance when we were seniors in high school. When I asked her for a piece of candy, she was sitting in the lobby at Northside High School. I said, give me a piece of candy. And she motioned, said, this is the last piece I have. And it was in her mouth. So I took it. She and I have differing stories. I say that I got more than candy. And she says that's not true, but either way.
One thing's for sure, she was saying, I like you, if she gave you that candy,
I like you
right?
back. Yeah,
yeah,
right. That's right.
There's no question
and
about it.
And sort of our lips touched, and I said, so you kind of like, Jim Carrey in that movie. So you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah.
And, but still, no, nothing really happened. But what did happen is that I knew she had something much more than just herself that I knew I needed. And
Right.
so when I right after high school, and when I tell you I was not a good person, that's just the tip of the iceberg. And I had gotten so far down, my parents not pretty much, they wouldn't let me come home and visit. I'd moved to Atlanta and just building houses and tossing and turning and doing crazy stuff. And one day I went home and I knocked on my parents' door. My dad answered the door, and I said, Dad, can I stay here for 2 weeks? And he said, why you need to stay here for 2 weeks? And I said, well, I just joined the Air Force and I leave in 2 weeks. So they let me stay there. And I went through basic training, went through tech school in Colorado. And then I ended up in Utah as my permanent duty station. I was a bomb loader on F-16s. And when I got out there, I actually, Bruce, I said I used to say I found a Southern Baptist church to attend. I later found out it was the Southern Baptist Church in Utah.
Right.
And
Ain't many
I
of
went
them
to
there.
it. I went to it one time, and I filled out the visitor's card and everything. The pastor came to visit me, and I said, "Look, I'm not coming back. I just wanted to be able to tell this girl back home that I had changed, that I had found a church, and it was all a lie, and I knew it was." We would date occasionally when I would come home on leave. We finally eventually got engaged with very little dating time. I got out of the Air Force in June of '82, and we got married on July the 16th of 1982. And I can tell you, Bruce, that I knew enough about the Bible. I knew enough about God. I knew enough about things to know that I had absolutely, and I write in my book, I was like the dog that had finally caught the car. I didn't know what I was going to do. But what I did see day in and day out for the next few months was something different about her than I had ever noticed. I wouldn't say it's something I had never seen because my parents were good Christian folks, but it's something I had never really paid attention to. And she talked me into taking a class on how to share my faith with other people. And I knew it was a faith I didn't have, but I didn't want to disappoint her. So I took the class. It's called Evangelism Explosion. You may remember that.
I do.
I took that, and my homework one week was to write my personal testimony. And for the first time I know of in my life, God spoke to my heart and said, "Randy, you can't write what you don't have."
Hmm.
And in a state of panic, sitting by myself in our little home on Diggs Boulevard, had my homework stuff out on the table. I had my Bible out on the table, and I panicked. And I started going through the Bible, and I started reading my cards, and until I finally got to a point, Bruce, where I cried out to God, and I said, "God, I don't know. I don't know exactly what Jane has. I don't understand that yet, but I'm not getting up off this floor today until I have what she has." And so that day, it was September the 2nd, 1982, I prayed to receive Christ into my life. And I knew that I could go back to what I was doing all before if I wanted to, but I was different. I was changed, and I no longer had to go back and break her heart doing that. And so it's been a ride since then. And Christian life is not always easy.
I wonder how many stories are out there that people found the right person in their life, and it could have been a man or woman, but
Right.
found the right person that absolutely changed the course of their life. I mean, who you marry is like really important. And I think, and you were in some, I think it was God's providence, but in some ways you were lucky, and you found the right person. A lot of people are not so fortunate.
Right.
Folks, as I've already mentioned, this man we're talking to is a minister, along with everything else he does that you're going to talk about. Before I get out of that, you got to talk about your kids. You and Jane have two wonderful kids.
Yeah, well, I was working in a place, I'll never forget this, and Jane and I hadn't been married long, and we were young. We got married at 20 and 21 and turned 21 and 22 shortly after that. But I asked this guy at work one day, I said, "How do you know when you can afford to start having children?" And he said, "If you wait till you can afford to have them, you won't ever have them."
You'll never have them.
So I went home and I told Jane what this guy had said, and so we were married. July was a year that year of '83, and Gabriel was born, and we call him Gabe, of course, and he was born November of '83. So Gabe is 41 years old now, and he's just, I mean, what that did for us is that put us as a family.
He's a pharmacist, right?
He is a pharmacist, and he's married to actually Sarah, formerly Sarah Summerall, and her dad's a dentist in town, and a wonderful guy, wonderful family. They grew up together. They actually met in the church nursery. So Gabe and Sarah are both pharmacists. And then my daughter Callie was born a few years later. She was born in '87. Now, as you talk about changing your perspective on life, we had somehow been led to believe, without a sonogram or anything, that because we didn't want to know, but that we were having another boy.
Back then, they used to say it's dangerous to check, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we thought we were having another boy. Somebody had kind of led us to believe that. And when she was born and I realized that I had a little girl, my oh man, my
Oh,
heart just leapt. I didn't know what to do. In fact, I had asked the doctor 3 times if this is really a girl, and he said it certainly is, Mr. Toms. This is a girl. So I had my boy and girl, and Jane never did well health wise having children, so we stopped at 2. But Callie was my mother's first girl. So my mother had
wow,
tried 3 times to have a little girl, and all 3 of us hard-headed boys
wow.
broke her heart in that regard. So I'll never forget that Callie was my mother's first great grandchild and or grandchild, and it was her first girl too. Callie was by no means that frilly little girl that my mother had wanted, but she grew up quite beautiful, and my kids are awesome. I do love them. I mean, I do. I really do. And I say this all the time. I love my children,
No
but
question.
each one of them had 3 children. And so their significance in my life greatly reduced when they started having my grandchildren,
I
because I have
understand.
6
I
I have 6
understand that.
grandchildren now. Their ages are 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, and 5, and they are the light of my life. And it is just amazing how much you love your grandchildren.
No doubt. That changes your world. Folks, I'm talking to Randy Toms, former mayor of Warner Robins, Georgia. Right now, he is serving as a executive director at the Georgia Firefighters Standards and Training Council. Since you were mayor, 8 years of Mayor of Warner Robins, your horizons have been expanded greatly. You're doing things you never thought you would do. That was a pretty big gig, being mayor of Warner Robins. What 85,000 people here in a
Yeah.
growing area, and the county much bigger than that. So talk about what you do now with the Georgia Firefighter Standards and Training Council.
Yeah, I actually did 2 terms as mayor, and I ran for a third term. And I really was torn. People ask me this all the time. I was torn because this position, I was sitting on the council appointed by Governor Deal a year after I became mayor to sit on the council for Georgia Firefighter Standards and Training Council. So I knew this position that I have now was open. It was something that I actually thought, with my experience, my time in the fire service, and my time in politics, that I could do well at. And I just didn't know how to quit. And so I ran for a third term. And within days after I lost that election, which was okay. I've learned in my almost 65 years now that God really does put you in places sometimes to suffer a loss to be where you need to be. And I'm good with that.
Isn't that the truth?
It really is the truth. It is the truth.
For sure.
I was fine with that. And I'm not 100% sure, Bruce, whether Jane voted for me in the last election, because it's a challenge for sure. But I applied for this position, and actually, I left office the first week of January of 22, and interviewed for this position for the first time the end of February. But in person, I came up here to the Georgia Public Safety Training Center in Forsyth, where I am now, and interviewed with the council in person. And on that day, March the 1st, they offered me the position, and I started here on March the 16th of 22. So just a couple, 2 or 3 months after I left office, I was in what now, and I say this unapologetically, without any reservation at all, is that I love what I'm doing now as well, if not more than anything I've ever done.
When you lost that mayor's race, the third term, you were out on a limb. You had no idea what you were going to do, right? I mean, you had to figure it
Right.
out. You're not like you're 80 years old, ready to quit.
Well, I mean, I did retire, and I had my retirement, but I just wasn't, like you said, I wasn't ready to quit. So,
Right.
um,
So talk about your journey of firefighting. I mean, you've been
yeah.
firefighter forever. Let's just talk about how you got into that and kind of what you've done over the years before you ran for mayor. I mean, you were
Yeah.
you were around a long time.
Well, when I first got in the fire department, I wasn't looking. I never, I wasn't one of those kids that grew up wanting to be a firefighter, wanting to be a fireman or anything like that. I don't remember ever having anybody in my life that was a fireman that motivated me towards that direction. I knew I didn't want to do what I was doing, and I loved what I was doing. I was working for Collier and Allen and Allen's Tree Service, and I just knew that I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. And so, even though he was a great man to work for, but one day my dad called me and said, "Hey, I had a wife and a child by that time that had gotten quite used to eating, so I needed something." And my dad called and said, "Hey, they're hiring firefighters in Warner Robins." And so I went and applied. I was one of about 120 people that applied for 6 positions, and I was hired. I got one of those positions, and it was like as soon as I got in there, I just loved it. I fell in love with it. I went through training, and then my very first fire call was, to this day, one of the largest commercial structure fires that Warner Robins has ever had. It was called Star Laundry. It was right down next to the credit union on Watson Boulevard. And Jane, my wife Jane, and our son was actually over at the credit union when the call came in. And so she always says she rode over and watched me go in my very first fire. She said, "I don't know if I want my husband doing that for very long." And she never told me I had to stop, so I didn't. I started realizing that I loved it, and it's something I wanted to do for a career, not just for a job, but for a career. So I got involved with the fire department, and started trying to promote up to what they call driver operator or engineer. And I was in the testing process, and this was 6 years after I got on with the fire department. So it was in about 1991. And I'm sure as most people know, that firefighters are notorious for working all kind of jobs at the same time they're being on the fire department. I was actually at the time working 2 jobs. I was working as a firefighter, as a respiratory care technician at the Perry Hospital, and then I was operating 2 businesses that I owned on my own. And I was kind of not sleeping, just working all the time. And I remember one day I went to Jane and I said, "I don't know what's happening." I was having like these strange feelings in my fingers and my hands and arms, and it just kept getting progressively worse. And so finally I told her, I said, "I don't know what's going on, but it's not good." And she told me to go to the doctor. So we went to the doctor, and they diagnosed me that I need to sleep more, that I was just, they gave me some medicine to take. And I took it. I took it one time, and actually on June 14th, I went to work. Um, it got so bad that I couldn't remember where Jane had told me she was going to be. My mind was starting to mess up, and my boss told me I needed to go to the med stop. And I said, "Well, that's probably a good idea." And as I was starting to get myself in my van, a friend of mine offered to drive me out there. And I really don't remember anything after he asked if he could drive me. I just remember, I don't remember what happened. He said, I kept looking at him on the way to the med stop saying, "Bruce, if you'll just tell me where Jane is, I think I'll be okay." And he said he knew, after I said that about 10 times, he knew I wasn't really with him. And got to the med stop, and as I was walking through the front door, I fell and had a grand mal seizure. Bruce grabbed my arm on the way down, and destroyed my shoulder joint in the process. But I tell everybody now, I don't recommend ever having a seizure. It's not something that was fun. It's not something that I recommend anybody do. But if you're going to have one, a med stop's not a bad place.
Really,
You
really.
can skip the line. You can skip the line. You don't have to wait. You don't have to sign in or anything. I mean, they even get you a ride. It's called an ambulance. And they took me, and of course, I was subsequently diagnosed with a cyst on my brain, and was told that if it was growing, it was inoperable and it was going to kill me. And that was very, very traumatic in my life. Um, Set me into a very dark time of my life. And I thought my career was gone because I had to give up my driver's license, and I was testing for driver operator at the time. And so I had to withdraw from that process and miss out on a promotion. It just seemed to turn my world upside down. And so I continued on into fire service, finally got back on the truck, and promoted up after a number of years to driver, made lieutenant, and retired after 27 years and 4 months with Warner Robins Fire. I retired as a lieutenant in the Warner Robins Fire Department. It was a great career. At some point during my time, actually, not long after my illness, was asked to be the chaplain. And I'd never thought about being an ordained minister or anything like that, but I was asked to be the chaplain of the Georgia Association of Fire Chiefs. So I spent about 14 years doing that. And then I actually gave that up about a year after becoming mayor.
What year did you have the seizure?
1991.
91. You got over that, and it didn't grow, obviously. You're still talking to me, and you made it through, and you were able to continue your career. There's something about that I don't think people realize. I mean, you've got a passion for what you're doing now, what you've done most of your life. It's more than putting out fires. And there's a lot more. You've got these stories of touching stories of people, of things that have happened to you during your career. And I guarantee you, every one of your colleagues has stories that that draw you in, that once you do something like this and you get to be, it's more than a vocation. It's more than a way to make a living. It's more than that, right? Talk about a little bit of your experience in firefighting and what draws you to it.
Yeah, I always say if it's just a job, you're not going to last very long, because number one, you end up in some really, really hot places, like 1,200-1,500 degree rooms. People don't last long if they're not called to it. And then some of the things we see, are certainly life changing, mind altering, even sometimes, if you will. Some of the things you wish you could get out of your mind, and that's why. That is one of my passions even today, is that in the fire service and law enforcement and public safety in general, there's a dangerous epidemic going on, and that is suicide. People are seeing things now that they can't deal with very well, and and they're making decisions to just end it. And even during my sickness, I will tell you that I was diagnosed with that cyst on my brain, and I was told to come back every 6 months to see if it was growing. So I went back 6 months later, and it was there, but it wasn't growing. And then I thought, I don't really want to know if it's growing. I just figured one day I would wake up dead, and everything would be okay. And so one day my chief said, "Randy, will you please just go back and get it checked one time?" It was 5 years later. So I went back 5 years later, and it was actually gone. And now I tell everybody now that they never told me for sure, Bruce, if I had a small cyst on a large brain or a large cyst on a small brain. But the small thing was gone, and I ended up into politics. So I guess you could make the argument that the brain disappeared. I don't know, but the things I've seen I've seen some good, I've seen some bad. I think one of the most memorable ones is we went to a call one time, and there was a 2-year-old set of twins, and one of them had actually accidentally hung himself on the high chair. And when we got there, he was all but gone. And the other one cried enough to wake his dad up, who had fallen asleep on the couch after some surgery. And we were in their neighborhood, and we were the only truck at the time that had oxygen on board. And when we got there, we were able to do more with him than some other trucks could have done. And so we worked that call and got him to the hospital, and still there wasn't a whole lot of hope. And so you leave. What happens is, in the fire service, sometimes you just leave, and you don't find out what happens to these people that you deliver in such bad shape, and you just wonder, sometimes in your mind, you just wonder what happened. Are they okay? Did they die? Or and that bothers you a little bit too. And I think it was like 14 years later, I got a knock on my door, and there was this mom standing there with this boy who was about 16 years old, and said, "Do you know who this is?" And it was actually the little boy, and he had lived and grown up and wanted to meet one of the people that had helped save his life. So you get those rewards on top of the bad things, but the bad things do change you, and they put thoughts in your mind that you sometimes you wish you could get rid of, but at the same time, if you handle them correctly, they transform you into the kind of person that understands sometimes what people are going through better than you wouldn't if you hadn't been through those experiences. Like now, after my seizure, after that experience in my life, I never had a loss of empathy for the people that I witnessed going through seizure activity. I could say to them, I know how you feel. I've been there, and
Right.
it's very confusing and it's not a good time, but you're going to get through this.
I've always said that in the funeral business when somebody loses a kid, like in an automobile accident, and everybody's coming up and speaking to the mama and being very nice and hugging the neck. But then when the lady comes up that has lost, had a kid killed in an automobile wreck, you can see, and I used to watch it as a spiritual principle at work there. He helps us in all our trouble so we can help others in with the same help we received as going through any trouble. But that's not exactly the quote, but you know what I'm talking about. But they light up. I mean, their eyes light up because you're here and you've been through that, and this person has genuine empathy and sympathy for the person. It's not conjured up at all, and they see them as living and breathing and somehow survive what they're going through. So that does give you that, and there's no question. You said earlier, going through trouble sometimes helps us. It also helps others, and that's part of what becomes our focus, is we can use what we went through to help other people, and you've certainly done that. As you also, and you made me think of this as you were just talking, you're a minister, you became chaplain, and you became a minister, and you're a licensed minister and have been now for years. But I know that part of your ministry, not only when you get opportunities to help people whose families have been devastated by fire, but I know you've also had a lot of opportunities to help other firemen that have been going through, that have been devastated by whatever they've seen. And I know that's a big part of what you've done as a chaplain, right?
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time with a lot of individuals throughout the state, and as the state chaplain of the Fire Chiefs Association, I've had a lot of opportunities, and I count them as blessings that, to talk to people who are struggling with things, sometimes family situations, and sometimes some of the calls that have quite literally messed them up, and they just need somebody to talk to. And as the chaplain, you're in that role, and it's some people could look at it as a burden, and I just always looked at it as, this is why God called me here. And I know, again, when they would talk about things, I would go, in my mind and in my heart, I would say, I know that call. I wasn't on that one, but I had one similar, and it didn't help me. It didn't help me to share all of that with them, but they knew that I wasn't just a preacher. I was a firefighter. I was a brother to them. And so they had even a higher trust for me in that level, that I had been there. I had done the same things that they had done. And so, but then also as a chaplain for the fire service, the thing I never take for granted is the number of funerals that I've been able to preach. Chief Larry West, who was my chief that hired me, he was the chief that talked me into going back 5 years after my seizure and getting checked, and he passed away with cancer, and I had the incredible privilege to preach his funeral, and that is something I do not take for granted. Hoss Westbrook out of Cartersville, Georgia, was an iconic fire chief in the state of Georgia. And he was a man, Bruce, that everybody told me, you can talk to him. That's good. He's a good guy. Don't talk to him about religion, and don't talk to him about politics. And one day, Hoss and I call him Hoss because I called him Chief one time, and he said, my name's not Chief, my name is Hoss. And so we were sitting outside of a conference one time on a bench, and he said, Preacher, a lot of people think I don't talk about politics and religion, and the truth is I don't, but I trust you. So I want to tell you that I know Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior, and I follow him, and when I die and leave here, I'm going to be in heaven. And so to be able to know that about Hoss and be able to share that with his friends and family at his funeral was something that I mean, there's no amount of money that could ever pay for that privilege that I had in doing that for him.
The whole brotherhood of firefighters, it's a tight bond. I mean, it really is. I've never been a firefighter. I was a EMT, a volunteer,
Right.
and I even got some advanced training, so I got a little taste of that, but not a taste of fighting fires, but a taste of
Right.
going into some bad situations, and they depending on you to help them. Now this firefighter thing is kind of evolved. I mean, the firefighters are the first responders. If you call and your wife fall out on the floor, the fire truck gets there first, right? So you got people with different training, I'm sure, than it was when you first started, right?
Oh yeah. When I started, You learned to put wet stuff on red stuff, and you went to fires, and that's all you did. And now I would say fire calls are probably, for some departments, maybe as low as 10% of their calls, and the rest of them are medical calls and wrecks and heart attacks and all of those kind of things combined. And it's 80 to 90% of a typical fire department fire trucks calls are medical calls. And so you see so much of the what the hard times people are going through.
Yeah, well, you got there's fire stations a lot around here, and you don't think about it till you need them, and if something has happened, and they show up pretty doggone quickly, you're
Right.
glad they're there. I guarantee you that. It's a special calling. It's a special brotherhood, and you've had a heck of a life being involved in that. And I know it's been fulfilling. It again, it's more than just fighting fires. It's the camaraderie, the helping people. It's sometimes at the worst time of their lives. It's being trained to know what to do. It's all of that, and the love and appreciation you have for each other takes you a long way.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. In fact, I had the privilege this past week, which I wasn't even on the calendar or on the schedule, but I have a talk that I created called "Out of the Fire," actually, and it talks about my life experience and the dark times that I've seen. And one thing I talk about is how life itself runs in three phases, and I use the fire term. You're either going into a fire, you're in a fire, you're coming out of a fire. And I have this talk that I worked on for many years now, and one of the speakers got sick, and they came to me and said, "Hey, do you have anything ready?" I said, "I do." And
Oh,
so
yeah.
I got up in front of several hundred people and gave this talk, and it's about, again, I use it to focus on the mental health aspect and even the spiritual health. I talk about the God that works in the dark. When you go through dark times, you better have a faith in something. And for me, it's a faith in God that gets me through those dark times. Bruce, I'll tell you that when I was sick, and I tell them now, even when I did this talk the other day, that I don't think, I don't think I ever contemplated suicide. I've seen enough of it that I can't be honest. I can't say I absolutely didn't think about it, but I don't think I did. But I did pray. There was a time in that darkness when I didn't know if I was living or dying, especially for the first 6 months when I didn't know. Every little twitch that was it. That was the end of it. And I cried out to God, and I said, "God, just please end this. Just take me home. I'm ready." Just until one day I got to a point where I literally just calmly told God, if you can get more glory through my death than you can through my life, then I'm good. I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to leave this world. But if this is your calling for me, I'm good. And it settled me down in life. And in that, I'm able to help people get through those times, because firefighters now, and I focus on firefighters, they see stuff that absolutely causes them to lose sleep. And certainly not the least of which every firefighter would tell you this: the death of a child is just, it's unexplainable sometimes. And so for us to have each other's back, for us to be able to talk to each other and understand that we've all been through these kind of things, is something that most professions don't understand. That kind of camaraderie, that kind of family and brotherhood together that we get each other.
Yeah.
And it's so important in the fire service.
As I said, it's more than a vocation. It's a high calling. You spent your life doing it and using your faith, your ministry, to not only help families and to help each other. And you're right. You're about to go in a fire. You're in a fire. You just came out of one. And I say it gets night every night. The sun comes up in the morning. Everything is temporary. Nothing is permanent. It's certainly, you talk about taking your own life. That's a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Right.
Your situation may not change, but your perspective will change. Your perspective is not permanent. And so you keep plugging and you keep knowing that it's not going to always be a fire. And you're going to come out on the other side, but get ready, because there's going to be another fire. Just like every night it gets dark and then it rains.
That's right.
It rains and then the sun comes up again. So I want to move, because we got only so much time, but I also know, and you've done, you're amazing with this. I used to watch you on television when you were doing these telethons on TV. You're able to mix in humor with all this tough stuff. That's kind of what I've done. I've dealt with death and all that all my life, but I learned that the humor that comes with it is very healthy. And it took me a minute because I was nervous about sharing humor about serious stuff, but it turned out that
Right.
people were really wanting to hear that. And I for years, as you know, I've been around spreading humor, so I see you mix humor with real stuff, and I know that's also healthy, right?
It is, and it is for me. And some people are made differently, and certainly Jane would tell you that I am definitely made different than most people are. But I actually, Bruce, and I give you the credit for something I heard you say probably that very first time I ever heard you speak, and that is, I think you quoted Will Rogers, where he talked about the difference between a comedian and a humorist, and it's always played a part in how I try to operate. And that is that a comedian makes you laugh, and a humorist makes you think while you laugh. And so, I've done things. I've preached my mother's funeral. I've preached my dad's funeral now, and to do those things, and then wrote the book I wrote, and the stories I tell in my book, and then I always mix in humor with them because number one, it helps me, but I think it also makes people think about things with a more open mind if they're able to laugh a little bit. So even with my mother, I had people, and I did, it's just, I think it's just the way God's made me. I mean, I
Right.
tell people all the time, I don't dance, I don't sing. I got a brother that sings and plays, and I get static on the radio. I don't even have any musical talent at all. But the one thing it took me a long time to realize is that God has gifted me with a different ability to communicate, and a different ability to talk. So I tell people the only thing I do well is talk. But in doing that, I try to make people think about what's going on in life. And even the tragedies that I've seen and the bad things that I've seen happen to other people, it's not funny. But if we can't find some way in the fire, I remember meeting a guy named Jay Jonas, and I've had dinner with him, and he was one of 14 people that actually was in one of the World Trade Center towers when it collapsed. He and his whole crew came out of that alive.
Hmm.
And he told me that the doctors told him, Jay, we can retire you right now. With everything you've seen and what you've been through, we can medically retire you right now and nobody will say anything. And I'll never forget, he said, and do what? Spending the rest of my life in a psychiatrist office? I got to get back to the firehouse. That's what he said. He said, I got to get back to the firehouse because that's where we heal. And
Yeah.
so in doing that, we go back and yeah, I mean, and I'm not giving up too much information, but sometimes people wouldn't want to hear what goes on in the firehouse after we see something tragic because we got to have that.
Right.
If we don't go back and try to laugh and try to find something to rejoice about, we'll lose our minds.
Right.
And
Right.
and so that's where my side of trying to find humor in dark places comes from, is that I gotta have it.
I think that's why you and I connected. I'm created in the same mold, and I've learned there's a fine line between laughing and crying.
Right.
It's okay to laugh right in the face of adversity. You may be laughing one minute and crying the next. I got so many stories about that I don't have time to say right now, but I've seen that happen, and it's a healthy thing. I got to move and talk to you. We're going to hit this lightly, but how did you decide to get into politics? You were teaching Sunday school, and we went to small groups and all that kind of stuff. Next thing I know, I was at your victory party after you'd been elected mayor of Warner Robins. So
Yeah.
just talk about what that was about and why you did it.
Well, I want to tread lightly there, but what I do talk about, even to firefighters, is that there was things going on in the system that I didn't like, and I thought, with my experience, especially with employees, as a 27-year employee, there was things that I thought that I could make a difference in, and that I could, maybe help in some way or another. And so I just kind of, I don't know, God just hit me with you're sitting around, you're complaining about things, and it wasn't. it wasn't an individual. It was just that I thought there was some things that I could do differently and better than maybe were being done. And I made the decision to try to do something a little bit higher than what I was doing. And literally I was struck by, and I keep referencing fire conferences because it's amazing what God has taught me through the fire service. I was at a conference and there was a guy there named Dr. Ritzy, and he was talking about safety on a fire ground and safety around the fire station and stuff. And he said this, and I was sitting on the front row at this event, and I'll never forget, Bruce. He said, there was a guy in the Bible, and he said, I am not a preacher by any means. In fact, he pointed at me and he said, there's the preacher right there. But I'm going to tell you, there was a guy in the Bible, and his name was Saul. And Saul was going down the road one day, and he saw a light. He saw a light, and it was a great light. And Saul had a decision to make. He could either see the light and go back to the fire station and complain about it, or he could see the light and be the light. And so I went back home that time, and I told Jane, I said, Jane, I think I'm going to go ahead and take this early retirement and run for mayor. She said, somebody needs to. She later told me she meant somebody else and not me. But I just made a decision that instead of complaining about something, if I had an issue, if I thought I could do better, to not just sit around and talk about it, but jump in and try to do something about it. I've always said, people used to ask me, well, do you think God's called you to be mayor? My honest answer was, I don't know. But God called me to run.
Wow.
God called me to run. And so in my lessons in life, sometimes it's the journey where you learn the lessons and not the outcome.
And you had to be stretched beyond your gourd going into that. And that's a whole nother lesson, a whole nother story. You were doing something that the truth is, if God didn't come through, you were sunk. You were in an area you'd never been in your life. And you did really well in that role. And I know you were learning things that you had no idea you would learn. And now all of a sudden, we could talk about this mayor thing, and that was a fast moving job. The fact that you could stand on your feet and talk was a huge plus for you. But
right.
you were doing things that you'd never done, and you had to be stretched at night. But now all of a sudden, maybe you now realize why you were mayor, because now all of a sudden after 2 terms as mayor, you got in all the political stuff. You've been a firefighter. You've gone through personal trials of your own where you weren't even sure you would live or not. And now you're getting to use all of that experience to do what you do now. And that's a pretty cool story to me. So just talk about how your audience is larger than it's ever been. You're sharing your life experiences to bigger audiences. Your tent has been expanded, and you're able to communicate with people all over the state. So just talk about the fulfillment in that and what you're doing now, how you look back and say, wow, all that was happening so I could do what I'm doing now. I think I'm right.
No, absolutely, you're right. In fact, when I had told you earlier that I was sitting on the council, and they had even begun the interview process from some other candidates for the position I have now. And I heard one of the council members say one time that he said, what we're looking for, and I really wasn't too active because I had already turned in my resume, but I was listening to the process, and I heard one of them say, what we're looking for in the position of executive director of council is somebody that understands the fire service and speaks the language and knows fire chiefs throughout the state of Georgia. And I thought, okay, I've got 30 years by that time, 30 years in the fire service, 30, probably closer to 35. I was chaplain of the Fire Chiefs Association for 14 years, so I know people all over the state. And he said, we need somebody that understands politics and understands the language of how to talk to the legislators and stuff. And I said, okay, to myself, I said, okay, I was mayor for 8 years, and I know a lot of people in the state government and, have a lot of contacts and know the language. And he said, we need somebody that this is, you'll giggle at this one. He said, we need somebody that don't mind being the face of our agency and the voice and speaking in front of talking to people and standing in front of people and speaking. I had once actually accepted the position of chaplain to the Southeastern Association of Fire Chiefs. And spoke at the International Fire Chiefs Association conference briefly in front of approximately 10,000 people. And all of a sudden it dawned on me that everything that God had brought me through, good, bad, and indifferent, had led me to a position now where I was ready to help the Georgia Firefighters Standards and Training Council take the next steps as we have over the last 3 years. And so I told them in that meeting, I said, guys, y'all, I'm not bragging. I'm really not. I'm just telling you where God has brought me. Y'all, what? Because they had told me they weren't even going to interview me. And I said, well, what y'all are talking about right now, that's me. That's me, because God has brought me through all of these situations to be where I am now. At least give me the chance. And they did. And because of what God had allowed me to do in my career, I was ready to take the lead in this agency. And it's been an incredible journey. I love what I'm doing. I will go ahead and answer this question right now, Bruce. I hope you don't mind me stealing this moment, but it's 2025 now, and there's a mayoral election going on in the city of Warner Robins this year, and I'm not going to be in it. People are asking me. Yeah, they're asking me now, are you coming back and running again? And I did my time, and I loved it. I loved most of it, not all of it, but I'm not coming back. I'm doing what God's called me to do now, and that is serve. Let me just tell you briefly, there's 522 fire departments in the state of Georgia. There's about 3,500 fire stations with approximately 32,000 fire personnel in the state of Georgia. And that's who me and my staff, there's only 12 of us on this whole staff. So we have to check all of those stations, all of those departments, all of the training records for all of those fire personnel every year with 12 people, really 11, because I'm the director. And I tell everybody I don't do anything, but that's not true. I do a lot. But what they do, the staff I have is just I promise you, I have the best staff of any agency per capita in the state of Georgia, and I'm very proud of the work they do and the men and women they are for the state of Georgia Fire Service. It's an awesome privilege to be a part of this agency.
It's a good feeling doing what you were put on earth to do, isn't it? Isn't that a good feeling?
It is.
I mean, really.
When you know you're where God's called you to be, there's nothing like it, really.
I think I'm right about this. You're about to kick off a podcast of your own. You're going to host a podcast that I think you're going to have a lot of firefighters as audience.
Yeah.
You're going to have others as well. I can't think of a more perfect person to host a podcast. So talk about what you're going to be doing and how you're going to unfold that. When is that going to happen? And just talk about that a little bit so we can get that out there.
Yeah. So, 3 years ago when I first got into this position, I knew what you were doing with your podcast and others. And I thought, wow, what would be great? Because I've traveled to over 100 and about 105 counties since I've been here in 3 years. And I thought, what a great thing it might do to just travel the state and talk to fire chiefs and firefighters and do a little podcast. And so I did what you and I know to do. I talked to Jane, my wife, about it. And so she slowed me down. And then recently I told her, I said, I think I'm going to start this podcast now. And she said, well, you got to do it the right way. Why don't you get in touch with Bruce? And you and I have sat down, and I still don't exactly know what I'm doing, but I've gotten some equipment. I'm ready to get it up and going. I've already made a list of people throughout the state that I want to interview that are just, incredible people. One of the first, I think maybe even the first person. I know you talked to me about some kind of theme song or something. Mm-hmm. And there's a friend of mine named Mark Ware, and he's recording a great deal in Nashville now. He is actually early in his career had a guy named Jason Aldean open for him. And he's an incredible singer, but he's also still in the fire service in Jackson, Georgia. And he wrote a song about the brotherhood of firefighters. And I asked him at the conference this last few days, what would it take for me to use his part of his song as my theme? And he said, just ask me. And so I'm going to use that. And I thought, what a great way to start that by interviewing him. And so,
yeah. You're going to have people listening. I mean, especially with the firefighting community, but you're going to have others that are going to be listening too. You'll have a good time with that, and you're the perfect guy. You'll never run out of guests. As everybody's got a story. I've learned that. I may get tired and I may take a break, but everybody's got a story.
Right. You know this. If you tell a story, when you go speak somewhere, when you're done, somebody's going to tell you part of their story.
Yeah. And that's what gives me in my retirement, and it'll do with you as well, although you're not retired, but it gives you a chance to hear people's story and give them a vehicle to tell it. And so that's fun. And you'll have an audience. You got a built-in audience with the firefighters, what your role is now all over the state as a former mayor, the political part of all that. You can mix a lot of stuff in. I'm looking forward to you doing it.
Yeah.
I just started doing it. I tell you, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And you go look at the first ones. I just had some kind of USB mic plugged into my laptop, and I was recording it off of something. And I learned as I went on, I can do this better. So my advice, jump in with both feet and go with it. Make your first one short if you have to.
Well, your audience won't understand, but I got my Zoom 6 in yesterday. So
good. So you'll get it. Yeah, I showed him that equipment I got eventually that I use. In fact, I'm using it right now. Let me ask you this, and we're going to end it. I ask almost everybody this, not everybody, but most. And, being an undertaker, I think in these terms, when it's all said and done, what do you want people to remember about you?
Well, I mean, obviously, I hope my life shows this. I want people to know that I love God and I love God's work in my life. And sometimes I get caught up in busy stuff, but I love God and I love my family. I love Jane. I'm grateful for him putting her in my life. I love my family like nothing else. But I also love the fire service. And I want people to know that in my career choices and in the things I've done in life, that I was a person that somehow developed enough courage and enough gumption to try to do something bigger than myself all the time. That's one of the things I put in my book, is to encourage people to do something bigger than themselves. And I hope I've led by example, and I hope that people would be able to say about me is that he wasn't qualified. And listen, people used to challenge me all the time. You're not qualified to be mayor. I knew that, but I had a heart to do it, and I had a staff that was willing to do it, and I had the gumption to try to do something bigger than myself to make a difference. And so that's what I want people to know, is that I love people, and I have loved my career in serving the city of Warner Robins, the state of Georgia, and at times even a bigger audience than the state of Georgia. I preached a message one time on the base, Easter sunrise service, and 4 guys that I had been stationed with in the military all throughout the United States were online listening to me. And so I was touching parts of this country that I'd never even been in, maybe. And so to know that all you got to do is make the step and be willing to do something bigger than yourself. I want them to be able to say that about me, is that Randy wasn't afraid to step out on faith and do things bigger than himself.
Folks, this is Randy Toms. I call him Rabbi Toms, if you can understand why. As he talks, he teaches. He's a teacher of life and a man of great faith and a great guy. Randy, why don't you tell us about your book?
The name of my book is Just a Fireman. Unfortunately, I've never listed it on Amazon or anything, so you can get it from me. You can generally stop by Southside Baptist and get a copy there. You can find me actually on gfstconline.com. People can find me there through the agency, Georgia Firefighters Standards and Training Council.
Randy, thank you, my friend. This has been great. I look forward to hearing your podcast, and I think you're just beginning. There's no telling what's going to happen as you keep doing this. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you,
You're
brother.
a great friend, and I love you, brother.
I love you too, man. Appreciate you.
Come on, boys, we ain't got much time. We got lives here on the line. Be the first one in and the last one out. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. Every mile we run, it weighs heavy on my mind. There's a part of me left inside. Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh
think and cry with the country undertaker.